And most of it is hand built, and then only a little bit is altered on the wheel. So you can pass it around if you want to. And what you need to make bowls. One thing for hand building that's extremely important is the little pony roller. And any kind of hand building, wherever you have a seam or whatever, this comes in really handy. They sell it out there. That bowl is built around this cardboard tube. So for the first project, you need some sort of a round tube, glass, pipe, whatever. And yeah, and then you need some texture. And one thing to use for texture is the Starbuck thing. It's free. Since it's free, you can cut it up into different shapes. Works great. You find things everywhere. This was at IKEA around some planter to protect it. It's a good shape. Corrugated cardboard.
Where did you get that?
Germany. This one, my kids got, when they were little, they got this big pack of different kinds of paper. Shiny paper, glittery paper, and among others, this thing.
That's a treasure.
I know. And I used to yell at them whenever they wanted to cut it. And if you had kids, you know what they do when they learn how to cut, they just cut, and then they never do anything with it. And I always yell, if you don't know what to do, don't use this cardboard, don't use it. And I guess they got so tired of me yelling at them that they just didn't use it at the end. And when Anita Clemenson brought in some like this, I said, I have some also. And you can actually use this. I've used this for over a year. It doesn't seem to deteriorate. Works great. You can make your own pattern by cutting it up and rearranging it differently and gluing it back on. So those are easy. These texture mats work great. They sell them outside. They're from Linwood. You can also get them online, potterytextureclean.com. Really great. I have lots of these little ones. These work really well. From online. After a while, you look for texture everywhere. There's all this stuff. You get it at the Cupertino Chinese layout. Some people have started to use wallpaper. There's a wallpaper. There's a texture that comes in these sheets. Yeah. What's it?
Scrapbooking paper that has a slight texture to it, which would be good.
Yeah. So if you're not looking for something that's too deep, if you really want really deep patterns, these work wonderful. They have a few out here also, or you get them online. And I have some other samples also. They're one of my favorites because they don't stick. You roll it, it doesn't stick. Makes a really nice, deep pattern. Or you can make your own. There was an article recently in the Ceramics Daily that comes to your inbox, and it made it sound really easy, really simple. But it wasn't quite that easy. It was easy to get the texture on, of course, but then you had to roll it, and I always ended up with a seam somewhere, and trying to get rid of the seam was not that easy.
So how did you do that then? How did you get rid of the seam?
On this one, I cheated. So on two sides where the seam was, on one side, I made it a flat thing, and I just drew a line, and then I did the same thing on the other side. Worked fine. On this one, it has such a crazy pattern, I could just go over it and fix it. This one, yeah, this one I think it worked on this one, but I was trying some fancy patterns. And it
What were those molded around? What were they molded around?
The inside of one of these.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. So, let's get some of this out of the way. So I like to work with a template because I work a lot with this size. This fits around it. It's a little larger, so I don't have to constantly measure. And I also like to leave. Well, you can't really see it on some of those, but if you like to draw some lines on your clay, or you just like to make sure your pattern ends at the same certain heights, you can already put marks on here. This one has a mark like about an inch from the top. So you can just mark that off on your. Okay, so I rolled some slabs already. These are about 1/4 inch thick, maybe a little less. But I usually work with about 1/4 inch. So we can also pass one of these around if you are interested. There's this advertisement in there too. If you want to see what they got, because this kind is really great. And they also come with a little handle, but I found that without the handle you actually have more control over pressing it in evenly than with the handle. So the trick with these, again, is the seam. If you, like the one that went around, you can't really tell where the seam is. And that's what I like to do on this kind. So you either have to pick a pattern where on several spots you don't have a pattern, and so you can make your seam right there. Or with that pattern, something like this, like I said, it's so crazy you can just go over it and it doesn't really show. That's always something to keep in mind. Now, the one, I'm just going to mark the top inch, just a thin line. I don't want any pattern there. And let's use this one this time. So I'm not going to put it on the top, just going to roll this right. And I don't worry about that. You can see the fabric from rolling the slab. It's still on there. That's fine with me. Yeah. Okay, so if you do this and you press really hard, what happens is your slab on the bottom will become uneven. So you need to go back and cut some off and make it straight again. Otherwise, it would work better with a larger ruler, but okay. Turn it over. And remember, anything you use, you need to cover it with cardboard, otherwise your clay will stick to your form. Don't make it too tight, loosely overlap it. And when you cut through, you want to cut through both of the layers. You want to cut at an angle, like a miter cut, a 45-degree angle. And that way you end up with two parts that will fit nicely together. And I don't score, I don't add vinegar and water, I just put the pieces together. Are you still using the vinegar?
I'm using slip right now.
Slip right now, okay. I've tried various things and it didn't, the wetter it got, it seemed to fall apart more and just didn't work. So, and this is where this comes in. You need to go over the seam nicely together. And as you can see, I just destroyed my pattern right there. But this one is pretty crazy. You can pretty much go over it again. Shows a little bit, but it's not too bad. And once the glaze is on there, it's not really visible. So that's always something to keep in mind. And for most of the time, you want to keep the tube inside because it makes it easier to move it around. I cut the bottom about, what's that, about this much larger than the top. And this kind of bowl or shape is really great if you want to make mugs. So if you use a thinner, one of those postal shipping tubes or something, you can make mugs that all pretty much look the same. Shape-wise anyway. Okay, now the bottom we do have to score. And if there are any questions or anything where you can't see, let me know.
Why do you score the bottom but not the seam?
The seam, because I roll it, it seems to stay together, while this, I think you just need to score to make it attach. Yeah.
Also, too, the 45-degree angle, the way they kind of nest.
Yeah, so you get an overlap
better than a
already.
flat edge to edge, maybe.
It seems to be okay, although the seam is really the issue most for when you take it to the wheel too. So what I like about this is that the pattern does not get distorted very much. Like some people had suggested throwing a really thick cylinder and then adding the pattern, and that does work. These don't work too well when it's too wet. But when you push it out then, your pattern, well, it gets distorted, changes dramatically, and it also twists around. So if you really want a nice, clean pattern, this is a great way of doing it. Add some water. Make sure your newspaper is not sticking out, and you stick this to the newspaper. Okay, and then all I do is, at this point, I just push it up a little bit and just go all the way around after you make sure that you've got it on there pretty even. Okay, so done with the outside. I need to take this out, and I add a coil to the bottom all the way around for two reasons. One reason, it obviously seals the two pieces together very nicely, and it also, right now the bottom obviously looks like this, so when you add a little coil it makes it a little rounder. You can add a thicker coil. I've tried adding a thicker one just to get it a little round. I had one of my friends complaining that these bolts were too sharp. She couldn't use her spoon or something. That didn't work too well. So anyway, you roll the coil. You just want to roll this part of your hand. Start in the middle, move out, and add it in. Then, if you can't see, if you want to see what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to get up and look at it. And when you attach the coil, put your hand on the outside so that you don't push the whole thing off center.
wet enough with what you just scored and slipped that you don't, yeah.
Yeah. Like here. It's pretty wet. Seems to be a lot of textures this time around.
Yeah. That's nice.
So when you make a mug, it's a little harder to get the coil in because the opening is obviously not that big. But it works. Or if you can't get your finger in there, your hand in there, like I am right now, you can just use something like this and press it down on the inside. It works really well too. And then remember the seam, you need to seal it on the inside too. Again, being careful that you don't thin the wall too much right there. Did you back in? So we're going to move that to the wheel in a second, but we need to attach it to the wheel. And usually you attach a piece with like 3 pieces of clay or 4. And that's how I started out, attaching it with just a few pieces. But it doesn't work because when you just have 3 or 4 pieces and you push out from the inside, your finger gets caught on where the pieces are. So you have to roll the coil that's long enough and even, pretty much even, to go once around it. It took me a while to figure that out, why it wasn't working. But so far it's pretty simple, I think. And
It's so petite.
well, I had a bigger one earlier, but then people kept on saying they couldn't see. So I ended up with this little thing. Okay, when you transport it, make sure you leave the tube inside or the pipe, whatever you're using. And you can obviously use something that's this big, but it makes it a little harder to transport and kind of gets in the way. Now, if you're all by yourself in the studio, it's hard to get it up the newspaper, but that's where your feet are from. So, well, ask somebody for help otherwise. Oh, I forgot to put the bat on. That's really smart. And as long as the tube is inside, it's pretty simple to move it. Okay. If you don't press too hard, it doesn't destroy your pattern on the outside. Okay, just round it. Okay, and now it's the time to take this stuff out. And that's why, since it needs to come in and out a few times, you want to make sure that it's a little loose so you don't have a really hard time getting it out every time. Okay. So.
Whatever covers your tubes with nylon stocking.
No. I guess I have newspaper. I would have to buy the other stuff.
Go to a friend.
Most people I know don't wear those things anymore.
No, you can get a whole package of like half socks.
Yeah.
For like $2 or something.
So I tend to start out by just pressing down a little bit to make sure it's nicely connected. And go over the bottom just a little bit with a sponge. That way it looks a little more hand-built. And try to work on the coil that I added so that it blends in. The main thing is to check on the seam while you're doing this, because the seam is really your weakest point. And then you slowly push out from the inside and shape it. Press too hard and too much at once. And you can, like the one bowl does go the other way, you can go this way. However, that becomes really frustrating because it tends to pop open. So
You mean the seam pops
the
open?
seam pops open, so you really, really have to try.
Yeah, see if you, because Barbara Brown uses paper clay. So it kind of just does this. Yeah, some paper clay. She put paper clay on her seams.
Uh-huh.
She doesn't slip, but she uses the paper clay, and so it kind of bonds
I'll
it.
have to try that.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can even give it a little rim if you want to push it out. That works. If not, you can always cut it off. Pretty much done. Minimal trimming on this one. So take the coil off again. And with your wooden tool, you want to press in a little bit and trim it at the same time. Press in, it seals the seam somewhere on the bottom. Cut some off so that you don't have to do so much trimming. And let's let our back and trim it. There you go.
Good, you know.
Very simple. Not much real work. Okay. So I'm going to show you this other bowl. This other bowl is going to be trickier. It requires a lot more working on the wheel. And I went to this workshop with Ruth Ann Tutball, is that how you say her name? And, well, several of us went. And she was showing us a lot of things with patterns and things like she was altering. And then towards the end, she was showing one, I guess it was a T-bowl. T-bowl. Yeah. And I said, oh, can you show this? And oh, it's so easy out. And she just quickly did it. Well, it wasn't that easy. It was actually really hard. So this bunch is all made the same way. And I start out on the wheel. This part is made with the slab attached to it on the wheel and then finished. On this one, usually on all of these, you can see where the seam is. Just overlap it a little bit. They all have an overlap. And somebody in the earlier group suggested instead of having one overlap, maybe have two overlaps, one on each side. That might be nice too. So that's something to try. Okay, you want to pass one of these around too if you want to. Which one? Okay, oh, I should have washed. And you can make those in different sizes also, just like the other ones, obviously. And are there any questions to the first one I made? Do it?
This is very pretty.
It's totally different than what she was making, right?
She's doing on the hump too. I don't know.
Yeah, I tried, when she demonstrated it, she was working on the hump. I tried that, it wasn't working for me. So I went back to just making one at a time.
She had a landing spot for her big slab, remember? But,
Yeah. Sorry, I've got to wedge.
Did you say this was thrown and you added a textured slab? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll show you. So you start out by throwing. So it's made out of two pieces.
Unclear about
It's made out of two
our
pieces.
understanding.
Okay, so you start out with what, tennis balls. I start out with a tennis ball size for most of those. Piece of clay. You want to throw a shallow bowl. And when you throw the shallow bowl, you really want to make sure you end up with a shape that's fairly straight up. You don't want to go out too far, because then the whole thing tends to go out to nowhere. And I end up, on the top, I end up with fairly thin walls, because that's where you get the overlap of the second piece. So if these are already thick, then you end up with way too much clay. You have to do a lot of trimming. Okay. There we go. So, just a little bowl. Obviously, you could make this larger too if you wanted to make a larger bowl. Over here. Now, usually I would have, after throwing that, I would kind of take a measurement to make sure that my slab will be the right size. But I just went ahead and rolled a pretty long slab that should be way too long. That should fit. It should, shouldn't it? Let's see how long this is. approximately. Those expensive ones?
Exactly. Yes.
You have the
So
red
it's
one.
about 15. Okay. So again, you can go ahead and it's really having one of these right angle rulers is really helpful. Having a large one, see, works even better. This thing.
What kind of paper is that, black?
Roofing paper? Yeah, it's a really thin one. I don't know, they had it at Sunnyvale, but this is,
We had some thicker stuff. It's very
they have thicker
frustrating.
ones. This one's extremely flexible. I don't know, I think they said that's the stuff that goes on the roof. Okay. Do you want to feel it? This one works great. Okay, so on this one, we're just going to use
There's only 3. It's the thin one.
this one.
It's too
Use
thin.
this one.
Most of the things I do.
30 pound is what
That's too
the
thin.
roofers use. That's that piece I have that had 2 strips.
Yeah. It comes in 3 weights.
Yeah.
This is the lightweight.
Oh, this is the thinnest, yeah. I have the medium one.
The medium is first.
Okay, so got a pattern on there, just rolled it on there any which way you want. Turn it over, and what I decided to, so that you don't have too much of a clay overlap, I go with this round part and I thin the bottom out just a little bit, sort of at an angle, maybe about an inch in, just sort of. And there's no science to it. This is not nothing precise, sort of, and then you end up with something like this. A little. And then the other thing I do is I draw a line about an inch in, just a very thin line on the bottom, about an inch across, because that will help me attach it at the right place. Let's begin with it. Okay, so just the thin line and then the angled bottom. It would help to have 2 chairs. Yeah. That's okay. It's
Next year.
It's not that far. Okay, so first I place it on the bat, just sort of to take the measurement. Still way too large. And I cut through, no, I don't cut through, just cut through the outside one. And I leave about, well, not quite an inch overlap. Don't leave too much. Okay, and now I lift it up, and this is where the line comes in really handy, because the line goes right at the top of your bowl. Just sort of a guide. The top or the
Bowls.
You want to come over, people? Yes. So the line that I drew is like right here. Yeah.
You align that.
Yeah. So that way you kind of know where to. Pretty round, pretty much at the same height all the way. The line would be like right here. So height all the way around. Sort of. More even than without the line.
Yes.
Than without the line. Okay, and just to make sure that it doesn't fall down, I just lightly tap the bottom in. Do I do anything else? And then on the inside, I connect the thrown bowl with the top part, just lightly going around, pushing the clay up. And again, no pouring needed. This is all so wet. So as you can see, it's just connected on the inside now. And same for the seam. I go ahead and connect it. Unfortunately, this bolt will require more trimming, and it may even require some trimming on the inside. Because if you trim too much on the outside, you get rid of too much of your pattern. So it may be simpler to get rid of some of the overlap inside. It's getting warm in here. It's so pleasant. Okay, so this is pretty much what it looks like on the inside right now. The seam is sort of gone. And then on the outside, I'm sure if you had some stamps, you could use stamps, or you just attach it with your fingers. Okay, now even with the line, it's still a little uneven. You'll usually have to trim a little off on top. Cut a little off. Okay, water. And the first thing I do is, again, I connect it on the bottom. Overlap just get in the way a little bit. And only, again, working on the inside. You don't destroy your pattern. Out. Checking the seam every once in a while.
So did you overlap in this case to make it much more strong because you are altering more?
I just decided that I was going to try a little more of the looser look too. And it seems, because when you work on this, it's really easy to use the pony roller and connect the seam nicely, and and
do that.
and fix it if you need to with your pattern.
Yeah.
While on here, it's really hard to fix the pattern because you don't have a shape on the inside, so you would have to try to press against it. So that's the main reason.
So it's a more of a closure issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus I've been so uptight about not being able to see the seam and everything. It kind of feels good to not have to worry about it. Yes, yes. And like Irene suggested earlier, it might actually be fun to try it with two seams and see what it looks like.
What's the most you've ever extorted one?
I think the hardest, not the most, but the one that's going out, those are really the hardest because they really tend to pop. Otherwise, not that much because it kind of changes the pattern too much too when you push it out a lot. But pretty much this is it. Pushed somewhat further, but then not here because it seems flat.
So is your clay really soft?
This one is. This is B-Mix, and I don't think it has sand or anything in it. It seems really soft. It works. Hard clay does not work too well. I tried some where I made it first and let it sit for a while, and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to work that well.
So your limitation is that seam, right?
Yes. Anyway. I think we'll leave it like that. Anyway, again, use this. Undercut a little bit. Done. And then when it's leather hard, go back and just trim a little bit because you can still see the overlap a little bit of the two of them. Trim a little on the outside, and that's it. So pretty simple. And as you can see, the pattern is not as deep anymore as it used to be. So the more you push out, the less you can see the pattern. Yes, yes. But I mean, it depends on how much you want to feature your pattern, how much you want to press on. Again, I'm way too fast. Are there any questions?
Well, if you started with a wider bottom, it sounds like you can't push that much. So I guess it just depends on what you're trying to make.
Yeah, obviously if you would make a shallow bowl that was this big already, right?
Yeah.
But it gets, when your slab gets really large,
Yeah.
it gets a little harder to handle. And, because it falls over, it collapses. And it's harder, it almost takes two people to get it on. Because
To get it on straight.
yeah, because with this one you could kind of hold it and fold it around, and it went on pretty easily. But I tried one that was larger, and it kept on falling off where I wasn't holding it. So I think if you had a second person that was for a minute or two helping you, that would work better.
Was that because I know you were experimenting quite a bit with this technique before you were able to figure it out. Was that the biggest problem?
No, the problem was that my bolts kept on going out too much. I think when I was throwing the little bowl, the shallow bowl, I was not throwing up, up straight. It was too far out.
I see. So the bowl is really important.
Yeah, and then I got frustrated because I used to trim only the outside, and then most of my pattern disappeared. Until it occurred to me I should trim it on the inside.
Cool. Cool that you figured that out.
Would you like to try any of the stamps or anything? Or?
So Gina, the bowls over here, the ones that go in at the bottom, are those all the ones you did this way?
So these three, as well as the blue one that Mary is holding, they were all made the second way. And these over here, these were all made the first way. So, and that one was made the first way.
You can always put a coil on the bottom too. Because the foot's trimmed.
These all sort of have a foot.
Gina, did you put this on in 3 separate sections? Because you have 3
Yes.
seams, which I like a lot.
No, it's one piece.
It was one piece.
It's one piece, but then it just has this one. because it didn't look that good placing it next to each other, so I figured the pattern looks better with a little space in between. And you can play around, with these, and sometimes some of these are actually too big. You may need them smaller because your circumference. This is 7 inches. And it works great on this one because that's 22 inches, so you end up with a little gap in between. But if it's, let's say it was 20, so nothing was going to work right, you can just put a piece of tape over it and use it too. It works great too. And just make it smaller. So like these, just make it one shorter. It works great.
Thank you.